The rain hit the windshield so hard it sounded like gunshots. Daniel Hayes tightened both hands around the steering wheel of his rusted pickup while his 7-year-old daughter slept against the passenger door, her tiny sneakers pressed against the dashboard. It was nearly midnight. The highway outside Chicago was almost empty except for the blur of headlights slicing through the storm. His phone buzzed again. Another unpaid bill notification. Another reminder that he had exactly $11 left in his bank account. And exactly 0 reasons to believe tomorrow would be any better. Just 12 hours earlier, security guards had walked him out of Holbrook Dynamics like a criminal after 15 years of loyalty. 15 years building engines, designing prototypes, fixing disasters nobody else could solve. 15 years of skipped birthdays and sleepless nights. Then the new CEO decided to restructure. That was the word they used before destroying someone's life. Restructure. His manager wouldn't even look him in the eye when they fired him. We're eliminating unnecessary departments. Unnecessary. Daniel almost laughed thinking about it. Half the machines in that company still ran because of him. But none of that mattered anymore. He glanced toward his daughter. Mia was sleeping peacefully despite everything. Kids had a strange talent for believing their parents could survive anything. Daniel wished he believed it too. Lightning exploded across the sky. That was when he saw the car. A black luxury sedan spun across the opposite lane like a bullet. 1 second it was driving normally. The next, it hydroplaned violently, smashed through the guardrail, flipped twice, and disappeared down the embankment. The sound was horrifying. Metal tearing apart. Glass exploding. Then silence. Daniel slammed the brakes so hard his truck fishtailed sideways. "Mia!" he shouted. His daughter jerked awake instantly. "What happened?" "Stay inside the truck. Lock the doors. Don't move." "But Dad." "Now!" The fear in his voice froze her. Daniel grabbed his flashlight and sprinted into the storm. Rain hammered his face as he slid down the muddy embankment. The sedan was upside down against a cluster of trees, smoke pouring from the crushed hood. Gasoline leaked everywhere. Inside the wreckage, a woman hung upside down by her seatbelt, blood running down the side of her face. Daniel yanked at the mangled door. It wouldn't move. The engine hissed violently. He smelled fuel. One spark and the entire car would become a bomb. The woman's eyes fluttered open weakly. "Help!" she whispered. Daniel grabbed a jagged piece of metal and smashed the remaining window apart with his elbow. Glass tore through his skin. He ignored it. The seatbelt jammed. "Come on!" he growled desperately. Smoke thickened around them. Then he heard it. A faint crackling sound from the engine. Fire. Daniel ripped harder until the seatbelt finally snapped loose. The woman collapsed onto him unconscious as flames suddenly erupted beneath the hood. "Move!" he screamed at himself. He dragged her through the shattered window seconds before the car exploded behind them. The blast hurled both of them into the mud. Heat ripped across his back. For several seconds, Daniel couldn't hear anything except ringing. Rain mixed with smoke above them. The woman coughed violently beside him, barely conscious. He pulled off his jacket and wrapped it around her shaking body. "It's okay," he said breathlessly. "You're okay." Sirens echoed in the distance. The woman stared at him through blurry eyes. Most people would have missed it. But Daniel noticed something strange immediately. Even covered in blood and rain, she looked familiar. Not celebrity familiar. Powerful familiar. The kind of face you only see in business magazines or giant conference screens. Then realization hit him like ice water. Claire Bennett. Billionaire investor. Owner of Bennett Capital. One of the most feared businesswomen in America. Daniel's eyes widened. Before he could say anything, Claire grabbed his wrist weakly. "There were brakes," she whispered painfully. "They failed." Then she passed out. The next morning, Daniel woke up on his couch with an ice pack against his shoulder and a pounding headache. News reports about the crash flooded every channel. Billionaire CEO Claire Bennett survives near-fatal highway accident. Sources say mechanical failure may have caused the incident. Bennett declined public statement. Daniel muted the television. None of this changed his reality. His rent was overdue. His truck barely ran. And his daughter needed school supplies he couldn't afford. Heroism didn't pay bills. His phone rang suddenly. Unknown number. He answered cautiously. "Hello? A calm female voice responded instantly. Mr. Hayes. Ms. Bennett would like to meet you. Daniel frowned. What? She says she owes you her life. 2 hours later, Daniel walked into the tallest building he had ever entered. Everything inside Bennett Capital screamed wealth. Marble floors. Giant glass walls. Employees in suits worth more than his truck. People stared at him because his jacket still smelled faintly like smoke. An assistant led him into a massive office overlooking the city. Claire Bennett stood beside the window. Alive. Perfectly dressed. Bandage visible near her temple. She turned slowly toward him. For a moment neither spoke. Then Claire said quietly, You pulled me out before the car exploded. Daniel shrugged awkwardly. Anyone would have done it. No, she replied coldly. Most people freeze. There was something intense about her eyes. Calculating. Sharp. Like she studied every word people said, searching for lies. She approached him slowly. You have a daughter. Daniel stiffened slightly. Yeah. You lost your job yesterday. His expression hardened instantly. How do you know that? I make it my business to know things. Of course she did. People like Claire Bennett didn't become billionaires by accident. She handed him a folder. Inside were documents from Holbrook Dynamics, his former company. Daniel frowned in confusion. What is this? Claire's voice became dangerously calm. The company that fired you yesterday is responsible for the brakes failing in my car. Silence filled the room. Daniel looked up slowly. What? The vehicle I drove used experimental components manufactured by Holbrook Dynamics. Claire's eyes narrowed. Someone approved defective systems despite safety warnings. Daniel felt sick. That's impossible. 3 people died during private testing last year. The incidents disappeared quietly. Daniel stared at her. He had heard whispers inside the company. Rumors about rushed prototypes and buried reports. But management killed every discussion immediately. Claire stepped closer. I investigated all night. Her expression darkened. Then I discovered something interesting. She slid another paper toward him. Daniel's stomach dropped. It was his termination record. Reason for dismissal: internal objections disrupting production efficiency. His jaw tightened. Months earlier, Daniel had argued against unsafe shortcuts during a development meeting. He warned management the braking systems weren't ready. They ignored him. Then fired him. Claire studied him carefully. You tried to stop it. Daniel looked away bitterly. Didn't matter. Claire was silent for several seconds. Then she asked quietly, How much severance did they give you? Daniel laughed once. Not because it was funny. Because it was humiliating. 2 weeks. Claire's eyes turned cold enough to freeze steel. By evening, every financial news station in America exploded with breaking headlines. Claire Bennett launches hostile takeover of Holbrook Dynamics. Stock prices collapsing after safety investigation rumors. Emergency board meetings underway. Inside his tiny apartment, Daniel watched the chaos unfold in disbelief. Mia sat beside him eating noodles from a paper cup. Daddy, she whispered. Is that the lady you saved? Yeah. She looks angry. Daniel stared at the screen. Claire Bennett stood outside Holbrook headquarters surrounded by cameras. Angry didn't even begin to describe her expression. The reporter shoved a microphone toward her. Ms. Bennett, are the rumors true? Are you buying the company? Claire answered without hesitation. Yes. Why? Her next words made Daniel nearly drop the remote. Because companies that destroy innocent lives shouldn't exist. The interview ended instantly. Mia looked confused. Daddy, what does that mean? Daniel didn't answer. Because honestly, he didn't know. The following morning, Holbrook Dynamics officially collapsed. Board members resigned. Executives vanished. Federal investigators stormed headquarters. And by noon, Claire Bennett owned controlling interest in the entire corporation. Daniel expected that to be the end of it. He was wrong. At exactly 3:17 p.m., another black car stopped outside his apartment building. This one wasn't wrecked. A driver stepped out. Mr. Hayes, he said politely. Ms. Bennett is requesting your presence. Daniel blinked. Again? 20 minutes later, he entered the executive conference room at Holbrook Dynamics for the first time since being fired. Only now everything felt different. Employees whispered nervously when he walked by. Executives avoided eye contact. Fear hung in the air. At the far end of the room, Claire Bennett sat at the head of the table. The same chair once occupied by the CEO who fired him. She gestured calmly toward the seat beside her. Sit. Daniel obeyed cautiously. The former CEO, Richard Holbrook, sat across from them looking pale and furious. Claire folded her hands. Mr. Holbrook, she said smoothly, would you like to explain why your company ignored safety reports? Richard glared at Daniel instantly. This is because of him? Daniel's jaw clenched. Claire didn't even blink. No, she replied coldly. This is because you nearly killed me. Richard slammed his fist on the table. You can't prove anything. Claire opened a folder. There are emails, deleted reports, financial transfers, witness statements. Her voice sharpened. Would you like me to continue? Richard's confidence evaporated visibly. Daniel watched in stunned silence. Claire turned toward him suddenly. Mr. Hayes warned management repeatedly that the braking systems were unsafe. Richard sneered bitterly. He was a mechanic. Daniel finally snapped. I was the only person there actually fixing your disasters. The room went silent. Years of anger exploded out of him all at once. You people cut corners every month while pretending safety mattered. You buried failures because profits mattered more. His breathing became heavy. People could have died. Claire stared at him carefully. Then she asked the question that changed everything. Why didn't you quit? Daniel froze. The answer came quietly. Because my wife died 3 years ago. His voice cracked slightly. Because my daughter needed food. Because sometimes surviving matters more than pride. Even Richard stopped talking. Claire's expression shifted for the first time since he met her. Not pity. Something deeper. Respect. She stood slowly. Richard Holbrook, she said calmly. You're finished. Security entered immediately. Richard turned red with rage. You can't do this. Claire's response was ice cold. I already did. As guards dragged him from the room, he screamed one final thing toward Daniel. You think you won? You're still nothing. The doors slammed shut behind him. Silence remained. Then Claire looked toward the terrified executives still seated around the table. Anyone else involved should resign now. 3 people stood instantly. Claire nodded once. Good choice. After the room emptied, Daniel finally exhaled heavily. What happens now? Claire walked toward the giant windows overlooking the city. Now, she said quietly, we rebuild the company correctly. Daniel rubbed his forehead tiredly. That's gonna take years. Yes. She turned toward him. Which is why I need someone I can trust. Daniel frowned slightly. What are you saying? Claire slid a contract across the table. His eyes widened immediately. Director of Engineering Operations. Salary, $850,000 annually. Daniel actually laughed out loud. You're insane. Probably. I don't have a business degree. You have integrity. That's rarer. Daniel stared at the paper like it might explode. This salary alone is more money than I've made in my entire life. Claire crossed her arms. Then perhaps your entire life has been underpriced. For the first time in years, Daniel didn't know what to say. That night, he took Mia to a real restaurant instead of microwave dinners. His daughter smiled more in one evening than she had in months. But the story wasn't over. Because 3 days later, Daniel discovered the crash wasn't an accident. Someone sabotaged Claire Bennett's car intentionally. And the person responsible was still free. The realization came from a terrified engineer named Marcus Lee who secretly approached Daniel in the company parking garage. Marcus looked over his shoulder constantly while speaking. You need to be careful. Daniel narrowed his eyes. Why? Marcus swallowed hard. The brake failure wasn't random. Daniel's stomach tightened instantly. What are you talking about? Marcus handed him a flash drive with trembling hands. There were orders from upper management. Specific modifications. His voice lowered to nearly a whisper. Someone wanted Claire Bennett dead before she could investigate the company. Daniel felt cold. Who? Marcus backed away immediately. I can't say anymore. Then he ran. Daniel stared at the flash drive in disbelief. Inside were hidden files. Encrypted reports. Private emails. Payment records. and one terrifying message sent 2 days before the crash. If Bennett reaches the board meeting, everything collapses. Daniel's blood turned to ice. Someone had tried to murder her. His phone rang suddenly. Claire. He answered immediately. You need security now. Her voice sharpened instantly. Why? Daniel looked toward the parking lot nervously. Because your crash wasn't an accident. Silence. Then Claire spoke quietly. Come to my penthouse. Immediately. By midnight, Daniel stood inside one of the most secure buildings in Chicago while armed guards filled the hallways. Claire listened without interrupting as he explained everything. When he finished, she poured herself a glass of whiskey slowly. No panic. No fear. Just controlled fury. They tried to erase me before I exposed them, she said quietly. Daniel nodded. Claire stared out the window at the city lights below. Do you know the strange thing about power, Daniel? What? It reveals who people really are. She turned toward him. When billions are at risk, morality disappears. Before Daniel could respond, every light inside the penthouse suddenly went black. Total darkness. Then alarms exploded throughout the building. One of the guards shouted outside. Move her now! Gunshots erupted downstairs. Mia. Daniel's heart nearly stopped. He left her with his neighbor tonight. Claire grabbed his arm. Focus! More gunshots echoed upward. Someone was coming. And they weren't coming to negotiate. Daniel looked around desperately. What do we do? Claire opened a hidden compartment inside the wall and pulled out a handgun. Daniel stared at her in shock. She checked the weapon calmly. I told you, she said coldly. Power reveals people. Heavy footsteps thundered toward the penthouse doors. Then someone began smashing through the entrance. Claire handed Daniel another weapon. He hesitated. I've never. Tonight isn't the night to learn slowly. The doors burst open. Masked men flooded inside. Daniel grabbed Claire and dove behind the marble counter as bullets shattered glass everywhere. His heart slammed against his ribs violently. This wasn't business anymore. This was war. One attacker moved around the counter toward them. Claire fired once. The man collapsed instantly. Daniel stared at her in shock. You killed him! Claire's expression never changed. He came here to kill us! Another gunman rushed forward. Daniel reacted without thinking and slammed a metal chair into the attacker's face. The weapon skidded across the floor. Chaos erupted. Glass shattered. Furniture exploded apart. Then suddenly, police sirens screamed outside. The attackers fled immediately. Within seconds, the penthouse became eerily silent again except for alarms echoing endlessly through the darkness. Daniel stood there breathing hard. Claire lowered the weapon slowly. Their eyes met. Something changed in that moment. Not romance. Not gratitude. Something stronger. Trust forged through survival. Claire finally spoke quietly. They won't stop. Daniel nodded grimly. Then neither will we. By sunrise, federal agents arrested 3 former Holbrook executives attempting to flee the country. The sabotage evidence became national news. And Daniel Hayes, the single father once fired like garbage, became the man standing beside Claire Bennett during every press conference afterward. But the moment that truly destroyed him emotionally came weeks later. He returned home one evening exhausted after another 16-hour day rebuilding the company. Mia ran toward him holding a school paper. Daddy! We had to write about heroes today. Daniel smiled weakly. Oh yeah? She nodded excitedly. I wrote about you. He crouched beside her carefully. What did you say? Mia looked up at him with innocent eyes. I said my dad saves people even when nobody saves him. Daniel stopped breathing for a second. Because after everything, after the betrayal, the poverty, the humiliation, the fear, that tiny sentence hurt more than all of it combined. His eyes filled instantly. Mia hugged him tightly. And for the first time in years, Daniel Hayes cried.